So I was talking to a pilot buddy of mine and his wife, and they're all excited because they're trading in their Audi for a Tesla Model Y. Now, I got nothing against Teslas other than they're crazy expensive. So I say, hey, you realize you can get an SUV that's an EV, save a couple of bucks, which means more money to your plane budget. And the wife was like, really? What else is out there? So I gave her a whole list, including the Kona EV, and she goes, but it's so ugly. Now, granted, that's probably a bridge too far, but it's not quite as pretty as the Tesla Model Y, which is why Nissan is coming out with this. If you saw my Nissan Z Proto episode, I shared with you the story of my friend brother Alfonso and his first trip over to the Tokyo design studio as a 22-year-old Nissan designer. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, he is now the chief designer of all of Nissan and all of Infiniti. But back to, 1989 when this happened, he was telling me how he walked into the design studio and he saw the then yet-to-be-released Figaro as well as the Z32, and he was blown away because he felt they were reimagining the car company at that time, because you think about Nissan in the mid-'80s and then think about a Z32 and the Figaro, totally different. And he was saying, I genuinely believe we are reimagining Nissan now. There's no nice way to put this, but he wasn't bull, because Nissan, as you have seen in the news, they've been going through their own trials and tribulations, and they do need some new product. Like, for example, you look at this thing here, it's a great vehicle to drive. It is one of the best EVs out there, but it is packaged in a dowdy, blah, B-segment car. It does not take advantage of the benefits of an EV propulsion system, which is why people buy Teslas. Good car, but not packaged well. And what's happened here, now that I've seen this car in person, like he told me on the phone about how it's packaged for EV, and I've heard this story before, and I usually do not believe this because that's the story all of them say. But in this case, the Ariya that we're looking at today is almost identical in length to that Rogue we drove just a couple of weeks ago, and it's maybe 2 inches longer than a Toyota RAV4. So that gives you a very good idea of what the size of this vehicle is. But the wheelbase, that's the most important thing when it comes to practical vehicles, because that's where you package a lot of people and a lot of, in this case, small dogs. And what they've done here, they've increased it. And to give you a little backstory again on existing cars, whether it's a Mazda, a Toyota, a Ford, a GM, or a Nissan, in this segment, they stay within millimeters of each other in size. They do not deviate 3 inches in wheelbase length, and that's what they've done here. And that brings us back to my conversation with brother Alfonso. You see, I'm a New Yorker, and if my memory serves me correctly, he lived in New York for a short period of his life as well. And we are the kind of people that don't hear your words, we look for your actions. And this one metric tells me that Nissan finally learned their lesson the hard way here, and they are now actually packaging for the benefits of EV. And rather than me pontificate here, let me show you an example. Okay, so all those numbers are fine and good, but they don't mean a hill of beans until you understand where the extra inches were spent. And yes, it's a lot back here, but I would argue the combination of the electric propulsion system with the extra dimensions changes the experience in here. I don't really mean by build quality or color and trim and texture. The feeling of volume is one of like a Mercedes S-Class rather than what this is going to replace, which is a Rogue or a RAV4 or something like that. So here's a great example of a repackaging opportunity once the propulsion system changes, and that would be the grille. Normally the place the engineer would hide the radiator in order to get more airflow to the engine, but being no engine, you don't need all that airflow. So the designers and engineers got together and they said, okay, we've got all this hardware we need to package that's going to support the level 2 autonomy. Now granted, this ain't going to be a self-driving car, but there will be something like the Pro Pilot Assist, at least a future version of that. So why don't we put some of the hardware there, like that radar system? But if I'm looking at that correctly, there's still a lot of leftover real estate. And that tells me that brother Alfonso and the team are leaving some headroom so they can package any required technology to support future level 3 autonomy and above that would be potential in this car's lifespan. So if you've been following along thus far, what we have here is a rather tall vehicle with an electric propulsion system. But that begs the question, if it's going to be the future of crossovers, is it going to be front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive? Well, this being a Nissan, it will be front-wheel drive with an electric motor in the front. But rather than connecting the rear wheels through a drive shaft, there will be an all-wheel drive derivation on offer. However, that one will be a dual motor, so a motor in the front, motor in the back. But the different flavors don't end there. There's actually going to be 4 different versions on offer. 2 two-wheel drive and 2 all-wheel drive, the difference being short range or long range battery in each one of those drive systems. Now that we better understand the architecture of the all-wheel drive system, let's focus on the propulsion system. And here I do need to give you the provision. I did receive some preliminary figures from the folks at Nissan. These may change, but I will say I will believe these numbers when I see them, because it's supposed to be an electric Rogue. These are vehicles for people that need to transport rugrats and dogs, not car guys like you and I. And these numbers are more along our lines than theirs. So a single motor would be 214 horsepower, up to 388 horsepower in a dual motor. The torque, 221 in the single, 443 pound-feet in the dual motor. Now, with that much potential horsepower and torque, it does beg the question, how do you manage output between the front and rear of the vehicle? And there I got a very interesting answer from one of the engineers. Turns out they're going to pilfer some technology from more storied Nissan marques. Like the torque split system, they're taking that from the GTR, and then the all-wheel drive management system, they're taking that, at least portions of it, from the Patrol. Yes, we do need to discuss the elephant in the room, which would be charging and range, but first a bit of backstory. This is a 2020 Nissan Leaf Plus that is fitted with a 6.6 kilowatt-hour charger. What does that mean to you and I? Well, here in the hangar, I do have a level 2 charger, and with any car that has this kind of charger, 6.6 kilowatt-hour, I am able to get anywhere between 18 and say 22 miles of range for every hour of charging. However, the car we're talking about, the Ariya, Nissan is promising a 7.2 kilowatt-hour charger. And for the avoidance of doubt, most new electric cars that people buy, like a Kia Niro EV, that has a 7.2 kilowatt-hour charger. And again, here in the hangar, or a level 2 charger out in LA, I'm able to do anywhere between 24 and say 30 miles of range for every hour of charging. Now, before we get to range, a huge hint advice here. I would love to chat with you about faster charging options, like we have discussed in many Porsche Taycan episodes, because that car has a completely different charging infrastructure throughout the vehicle that enables it to charge much faster, mainly because of the different wiring. Now, at the time of this shooting, Nissan has not shared any details above level 2 charging. With that range, you may remember we discussed 2 different battery options. The short-range battery will be a 63 kilowatt-hour battery, and the long-range option will be an 87 kilowatt-hour battery. In terms of what Nissan is promising for the Ariya, 300 miles of range with the 87 kilowatt-hour battery. Huge provision here. That's with 2-wheel drive. Inside, a couple of things jump out at you. First and foremost, remember in the Z episode, the interior there looked not only production intent, but production ready. This, it's a couple levels above the Z, and it's the switchgear, it's the color and trim, it's some of the fit and finish. But here's a really good example. Like this console, it can move forward and backward, and here in this car, it actually moves forward and backward. The same does not apply to the cup holder. That doesn't open, but you wouldn't be drinking in a show car anyway. But then there's the switchgear. It's not only production intent, it's a completely different paradigm for Nissans. It's not like other Nissans, and I see this as a direction they're going. And you can look at that kind of in the color and trim as well, where they hide some of the buttons in the dashboard. And we are once again at that point where I break out the old wish list from my brother Alfonso. And good news for him, notice I do not have my notebook anywhere here, so the wish list must be short. Let's start with design. I personally feel you have absolutely knocked it out of the park with the exterior design of the vehicle. My wish is more about the interior of the vehicle. Some of you may know that I have far too much experience with people that drive Teslas that are not paying attention. And as such, I am more adamant about asking for better, safer controls in vehicles. So Brother Alfonso, that means instead of this Japanese minimalist design you're going for in the interior, I get it. That's lovely for iPads and televisions. It is not lovely for a 4,000-pound vehicle. Can we have rotary knobs, toggle switches, buttons, that kind of stuff? Things people have been using for the past 100 years that have proven to be safe. Let's continue with that again. And then there is the money. Now, I started this episode with a bit of a gag about a friend of mine, Molly. She is lovely. Her husband, even more lovely because he flies one of these planes. But Molly wouldn't look at a Nissan. She is only open to a Tesla. And that is the biggest trouble that this vehicle has. Now, Nissan is saying it is going to be released in Japan in the middle part of 2021. It will be released in North America towards the end of 2021. And they're saying about 40,000 US. If I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, that will be probably the two-wheel drive short-range battery. But here is what I'm proposing again, staying away from a pricing third rail like we talked about in the Z episode. Don't make this thing $50,000, $60,000, $65,000 because that's what a Tesla Model 3 is. I know many people that have those things. I don't know one person that has bought a $35,000 Tesla Model 3. So the opportunity here is, let's price this thing at about 35 grand for the basic car, maybe 45 for the car that has everything with the two motors and all-wheel drive. And here is a huge provision here. You cannot rely on government rebates for two reasons. Number one, at some point they do go away and they will go away forever. We will cover that much more in detail in a future episode. And that's where they relate to the Nissan Ariya in the form of price sensitivity. You see, they are not all rebates. You don't have the federal government writing you a check for $7,500 that comes off as a discount on your car. It is a discount off your taxes. And when you're dealing with people who either A, price sensitive, or B, like the Mollys of the world, they may be lovely, but if your car is too close in price to the Tesla, Molly's going to buy the Tesla. But if there's a significant price difference and her husband, who wants to spend more money on his airplane, can save himself 20 grand, then you know what? They may walk into a Nissan showroom and once they get there, they will realize, wait a minute, this thing is not only attractive, it's actually pretty good to drive. And then there's the flip side of price sensitivity, which intersects with design, and that would be converting ICE folks to EV folks. Much more challenging than the Mollys of the world because they don't look at a Prius or a Hyundai Kona EV or even a Kia Niro EV and say, yeah, I want that car. They're looking for something that looks like a car, that feels like a car, that doesn't make them feel weird. And everything I could tell, with the exception of the driving part of this, you kind of hit that equation with what I saw today. But you have to get over that money objection. And with that, that is my entire wish list. I mean, I could get greedy here and ask for a T-top, an electric car, but I'd rather turn this around to you guys and ask, what have I not included on this wish list that you would like to see in a coming version of the Nissan Ariya? Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all one word, MotoManTV all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, I can assure you that Brother Alfonso will be looking at your comments, as well as some of the folks who do have an impact on the future production version of this vehicle. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.